If you're a coach and you're not doing this one thing in your coaching calls, I can guarantee they're not going to be effective calls. So, what is that one thing? Well, that one thing is if you're a coach and you're not doing this one thing in your coaching calls, I can guarantee they're not going to be effective calls. So it also does not matter what type of coach you are, as long as you are a coach who is creating a space and a container for transformation. And if this thing is not happening, you are not going to move your client forward. So what is that one thing? Well, that one thing is helping your client understand why they don't take action. So, this comes a lot of the times when we are goal setting. So, when we talk about a very specific goal for the client, and the client tells us why they want it so bad, and their why may be so big, and they have this real fire passion in their belly. But then, week after week after week, they keep coming up, and that thing has not been done, or it's not moving forward, or they're stalling, or they're, even regressing sometimes. So, why is that? So, what's the thing you have to do as a coach to create that container for consistent and sustainable change? So, I was having a conversation with a colleague yesterday about this, and this is something that is overlooked so often. So, I have listened to hundreds of hours of coaching calls. This man has listened to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of coaching calls. And the one thing that gets missed is attaching a very deep understanding of our goals and why we will not do them. And so when you set a goal with a client and you're going through something, the most common mistake that coaches make is they just take it for face value. They just take their client's excitement, or maybe they had a bit of an insight and they think, oh, they're going to do it. Well, I've been coaching long enough to know that they're not. Most of the time they're not, and maybe they do it the next week, but then it falls off. And the thing that gets missed is the client's understanding of what will actually stop them. So it's not about these big grand goals, because even if you think about it in your life, you have these big grand goals, but you don't always move forward with them. You self-sabotage, you pull yourself back. There's challenges in the way. And so when you don't take the time in a coaching session and with a client to help them understand why they're not going to do something, and where they have patterns that typically block them from moving forward, then they're just going to keep repeating these patterns. And so it's really important to identify that. So how are some different ways that you can identify that? So the way I like to identify this is with my clients. When they tell me what they're going to do, I help them really understand why it's so important. Again, that's where most coaches stop. And that's surface level stuff, right? If you want to be a good coach and if you want to go deep, then you have to be able to go deeper than that, right? So they know where they want it and they know what they need to do. Now we have to get into what in the world is going to stop you. So that all sounds great. It also sounds like you've known that you should be doing that for, I don't know, a year now in your business. So what has stopped you from doing it? And understanding the emotional attachment and the things that are going to derail them from that is what makes sustainable growth. Because if you just throw a bunch of things out there and a bunch of tasks and you're just really telling them what to do, or they're telling you what they know they need to do, then, and you don't understand the basis of what stops them in their life, once again, you're going to spin in circles. Once again, everyone's going to get frustrated. The client's going to get frustrated because they're not making progress. You're going to get frustrated because your client's not making progress. So you have to be willing to get uncomfortable and challenge that. And it can be really hard because sometimes clients are so excited and they are absolutely convinced, like they have been the last 15 times they committed to this thing. They're convinced that they're going to do it. And then when you come in and you challenge that, that can make them feel a little challenged. But you have to allow yourself to step in that role of the challenger for your client to help hold them accountable. So you also have to check in with yourself. What makes me hold myself back from pushing my client forward? Why do I get uncomfortable? What am I worried about? Do I not want my client to fire me? Do I think they're going to think I'm too harsh, or whatever that is? And this is you delivering this in your way. You don't have to deliver it as direct as I may do it, but do it your own way. But don't let up on challenge. Help the client understand what's going to hold them back. Help them prepare. Help them create a plan. Help them look ahead by looking back in the past and seeing what patterns they've had that have typically derailed them. So, one of my simplest, easiest things to ask is, that's amazing. I'm so glad we got to that. And you have a clear understanding of how to move forward, how to move this part of your business forward. Now, tell me, what's the one thing that's going to get in your way? Or what's the biggest challenge you see with actually executing this? So then they'll come back with things like, well, I might not have time, or if my kids, or if this, or if that, or if, you know, This other person that I'm waiting on something to do doesn't get back to me. And there's all these ifs. So then you get to the depth and you start to coach around the pitfalls that and the challenges that may be coming. And then that client is much more prepared and then they see their own pattern. And if they know that they're going to self sabotage and you've created that identity and that awareness around that pattern, then they won't repeat that pattern. That pattern will come up, they'll see it, and then they will be able to change it. And that is what is really important. And so if you are overlooking this step, if you're overlooking the exact how a client will apply the goal that you've set in your session, you're missing the mark and they're not going to be as effective. Again, they may make progress, they may do things, but if they're just doing them one to appease you, then they're not going to be able to do it when they're not your client anymore. So you're not actually creating lasting change. A lot of times clients will say things like, well, I didn't want you to be upset, or I told you I would do it, so I did it. And I'm like, I don't care if you do it. It's not about me that you do this. It's about you in your life. I don't need you to be accountable to me. I need you to be accountable to yourself. And so if you are only creating a container so your clients have to be accountable to you, you're not teaching them. Right? You're not teaching them how to do this for themselves. And so it's not sustainable and it's not as effective. So you have to be willing to get uncomfortable. You have to be willing to push into a different way of challenging. And you have to be willing to ask those questions and understand all the different depths of why a client may or may not do something that they're super excited about. And that's something you have to ask yourself too. So if you as a coach are having trouble setting goals and following through with them, you have to ask yourself, what are my patterns? What are the things that are getting in my way? What would it mean if I actually got this goal done? Right? My favorite question is a payoff. I'll do another video on that as well of just how powerful the question of payoff is in your coaching practice. But asking, what do I gain in return from keeping this pattern around? You have to be willing to explore that, or you're not going to make it to the level that you want to make it to as a coach. And if you don't make it to that level where you have that deeper understanding of why you do or don't do things, then you're not going to push your clients to that next level either. So it really comes down to doing these questions for yourself as well and doing this deep exploration of asking why, what now, what's coming up for me, what am I going to do, and what are the challenges that are going to get in my way, and how do I make sure that I do it anyway. So if you really want to make those changes with your clients, if you really want to push them, if you really want to challenge them, if you really want to see them create sustainable success, then you have to push. You have to ask beyond just the commitment. The commitment doesn't matter. What's going to stop them from reaching that commitment and completing the goals that they said that they would do, that's what matters. You have to understand the barriers and then coach around that. And then you're going to have some powerful questions. So I'd love to hear what you take away from this. What are some ways that you can start to challenge your clients more? Let's start a conversation.